This is Bombay, one of our fields here at Winterthorn. We planted this crop of winter maize back in April, and it is now reaching the end of its journey. In a few weeks' time, we'll be able to harvest cobs like these to feed ourselves, our farm workers, and their families. This year, 2024, Zambia has found itself having to grow our staple food, maize, during the cold season. And that was because we've just experienced our worst drought in 40 years. Most parts of the country didn't get enough rain to give us the harvest that could give us enough maize to meet our needs. Millions of Zambians who would normally be able to grow their own starch are now facing a food security deficit. It's a serious situation. Growing maize in the winter is not the same as most of us are used to when we normally grow it during the warm and wet weather we get in November to April. It's quite different, and we need to do some planning, some thinking before we even start. And then we need to put in extra effort and resources for the crop. And even when your maize is growing well, you might find yourself facing some hectic challenges. One morning in July, we woke up to see our crop of winter maize on Riverside 4 looking like this. It had been hit by frost, and we had to figure out what to do to make sure that it survived and could eventually give us something to harvest. This video, it's all about how we've been growing our winter maize in 2024. We're going to talk about winter maize and look at some of the important factors that we had to consider as we were planning for our crop. Then we will share some of our experiences and our lessons learned. And at the end of the video, we're going to go down to Riverside 4 and see how that crop we just saw there is doing now. Stay with us. Greetings from the farm. I hope you're well. It's so good to have you back with us again here on the Mondo Farms channel. My name is Chisha Folotia. Today I'm at Winterthorn, which is one of the 2 farms that we are developing on the outskirts of Chongwe. Here at Mondo Farms, we have chosen to do crop farming as our strategy. And one of our tactics is to focus on vegetable farming at a sizable scale. So throughout the year, we grow a range of different crops like sweet pepper, carrots, cucumber, and green beans. And every rain season, we allocate some of our fields to growing soya beans and maize. Soya beans is great for us for 2 main reasons. Number 1, it is a cash crop that we're able to sell on the market, and its price is reasonably steady. And secondly, it is a legume crop that helps us to improve the soils around our farms. We have a long-term program to developing into large-scale vegetable production capacity, and will need better soils. The maize is grown on smaller areas. We're not doing it on a very large scale like those commercial farmers who put down hectares and hectares of maize. We try to grow just enough to feed our family and to give our workers lunch each working day. Most of our people live in the local area, so they normally grow their own maize, around their family homes. We've got a few people that are housed in company housing within the farms, and what we do for them is to allocate some of the fields that we're not using during that rainy season to them so they can grow some of their own foods. Look, it's not like I'm some sort of angel, but one of the things that I've learned of 30 plus years of doing business in different sectors of the economy is that a company can only do well if the people that are working in it are as well motivated and taken care of as possible. One of our company mantras that we say in our management discussions is, "Company ni vantu." But the drought this year has left our workers with food security challenges. Most of them were only able to have small harvests, and some have no harvest at all. They've been having to go out and buy mealie meal out in the shops in town. We decided to grow some maize during our winter, which will be advanced to them at a reasonable price to help them take care of their families until the next harvest. Let's define winter maize and what it means for farmers here in Zambia. As the name suggests, it is maize that is grown during the colder season. Yes, I know we don't have snow or ice or like other people do in other parts of the world, but everything is relative, and the kind of temperatures that we get during the colder months, which is normally May, June and July, they can get quite nasty and be quite different from the rest of the year. The average low temperature that we have in the cold season is 5 degrees centigrade, but it can get much colder than that. And sadly, as climate change continues to roll out, we are seeing more and more instances of extreme weather where it does get very, very, very much colder than that, below zero every once in a while. As I said earlier, growing maize in winter is quite different from growing it under rain-fed during the much warmer months from November to March. There are some things that we need to take into consideration and plan for. The number one thing is that during the cold season, there is usually no rain. Mvula inasila. So we need to make our very own mvula. And maize grown during the winter season has to be provided with adequate water by the farmer, which is called irrigation. Planning and executing irrigation is the key to successful winter maize farming. So right when the farmer is starting the planning process, they need to be asking themselves all sorts of questions all about irrigation. Things like, which parts of their farm, their land, are they going to be able to irrigate adequately and successfully? Where are they going to get their water from? And how will they get their water to where the crops are going to be grown? And then what kind of irrigation system are they going to use? In our case, the issue of irrigatability was why we chose to establish our winter maize crops on Bombay and down on Riverside 3 and 4. These are parts of Winterthorn that have irrigation systems nearby or in place and that are supplied with water from our reservoirs up the hill at Apex and Riverview. Bombay is a place that we have had long-term plans to start growing vegetables since we first cleared this part of the farm back in 2021. All we needed to do was to clean up the Apex reservoir and then install a pipe network to bring water down to Bombay from it. We've been growing vegetables on Riverside 3 and 4 since 2020. It already has a pipe network supplying it from the Riverview Reservoir, and we didn't have to do very much to it. Now let's talk about the type of irrigation system that we chose for growing our winter maize this year. We chose to go for drip irrigation. Now, why did we do drip irrigation instead of other options like sprinklers? Well, like most of the decisions we make about the things we do in our farm and in our other businesses, there's a mixture of practical factors as well as some elements of personal choice. Mondo Farms already does a lot of drip irrigation. It's our thing. We grow vegetables throughout the year using drip irrigation, so we have a lot of experience with it, and we have built up quite a lot of drip irrigation capacity. We have a system of pumping water up to reservoirs up on the hill that is then fed down to the fields using gravity. We get good pressure, by the way. We also have a network of 50mm polypipes already laid and buried in the ground, taking water from place to place. And once we get to our fields, we have plenty of 40mm polypipes that we use as lateral lines. And of course, we have kilometers of drip tape already available. We also have equipment installed around the fields like drip filters to clean the water and venturi systems for use in fertigation and chemigation. Changing to sprinkler irrigation would have meant a lot more cost and a lot more effort. Sprinklers need pressure, so when we use them, like we did last February during the dry spell on our field crops, we then need to use pumps. And pumps need power from either electricity or from fuel. Using sprinkler irrigation would also have meant having to use a lot more water than drip irrigation does. And during this drought situation that we're facing this year, we have to be very careful about water usage. Drip irrigation is all about conserving water. So we chose to use drip irrigation, and then we set up this system of having one line of drip tape feeding 2 rows of plants in a diagonal pattern. After we set up our layout, it hasn't all been smooth sailing, and we've had to make edits here and there to improve water distribution, especially because of the sloping land. By the way, over the past few months, since we planted our crop and laid out our drip irrigation system, I've been watching some videos on YouTube, and I've seen a couple of different ways, different layouts and configurations that we could have done. And some of them, they are quite effective, and I've got a little bit of, is it FOMO or, okay, Nina Sanje Mwandi. But here's the thing, we'd already done the layout that we had adopted, we've already planted our crop and it's growing, and things seem to be working. You probably know this about watching YouTube videos, that you're always gonna come across different ways and better ways sometimes of doing things that you're already doing. And part of the game is knowing how and when to adopt those changes. I can plainly say that next time we grow maize under drip irrigation, we're gonna use one of the ways that I saw on one of those YouTube videos. Another factor about planning and executing the growing of winter maize is that location and irrigation capacity often means that it is done on a much smaller scale than we normally do during the summer maize that we grow. Like here at our farm, Winterthorn, we've got big fields, areas like Alaska, Brazil, and Canada, where we can grow hectares and hectares and hectares. But they are up the hill, on the other side of the hill, all the way up there, far from our water source, and we can't irrigate them. So we found ourselves restricted to only being able to grow our winter maize crops where we could irrigate them, which turned out to be much smaller fields. What does that mean for us? It means if we want to get the same yield, in order to have the same amount of maize crops, the same amount of tonnage, that we're going to have to grow our maize in a much more concentrated manner. A couple of years ago, I'm sure you've probably seen this if you're living in Zambia and you're on a WhatsApp group that has anything to do with farming. You've seen a video of the way some people grow maize in Zimbabwe, and it's called Fumfudza. So that's really inspired us to be able to grow maize in a systematic and concentrated manner, so-and-so spacing and whatever. Now, what we've done on our winter maize crop is not exactly the Fumfudza method, but it has been inspired by it. We've used the basic principles of being able to grow a concentrated crop. And given that, we are very confident that what we will be getting as a yield out of our crop will be able to last us and our workers all the way up to June 2025, when we are getting our next harvest. By March, we were deep into the process of planning for our winter maize crops. So far, we had decided where we were going to plant and how we were going to water it. And by this time, our team had already started preparing the fields that we had chosen and were getting them ready for planting the seed. Our next important factor to consider was the type of maize seed that we should plant in our winter maize crop. We went to one of our local agro dealers here in Chongwe. Now, they sell a lot of different varieties of maize seeds from all of the various maize seed producing companies, and they have an agronomist engaged there who was able to advise us about the different, characteristics of this one versus that one. The one that we finally chose, that he recommended to us, was a variety from Pioneer called P30G19. It has been nicknamed Inkosi and has been designed by Pioneer's plant breeders to produce large cobs and excellent yield performance under drought conditions. We had never grown this variety before, but we had come to trust the Pioneer brand since we started growing their seed last rain season up at Canada. We had excellent results, and we really believe in their product. We decided to go for the P30G19, and a few weeks later, we saw a demo plot of the variety at Agritech in Chisamba. We were quite impressed. So this is the one we've grown, we're doing as winter maize?
Yes.
It's good to see it.
Very much. Height good, cobs very good.
No, Pioneer is not sponsoring this video, so it's kind of a free promotion and endorsement. Let's think of it as a proof of concept to seed companies and other agriculture industry players out there about the effectiveness of partnering with the Mondo Farms YouTube channel in order to expose their products and services to our amazing audience, thousands of people out there who are engaged in African agriculture or interested in African agriculture. Mondo Farms YouTube channel has now started doing brand collaborations, so you'll be seeing a lot more of that kind of thing in future. After we had sown the maize seed, it started to grow quite well. We were watering it regularly and we had fed it with basil fertilizer to get it all started, lots of phosphorus. And by the way, for basil, we chose to go with compound Maxi Green from Omnia. No more compound D here. Our next major task in the crop husbandry process was to protect it from insect pests. Every crop farmer knows that it is only a matter of time before one or two pests decide to come along and enjoy themselves from your hard work. We were not surprised when our winter maize crop started to receive unwelcome visitors, and they were calling themselves Mr. and Mrs. Armyworm. The fall armyworm is an insect pest that has become a major challenge to food production around the world. We've covered it before in previous videos here on the Mondo Farms channel that you can watch after this one. The fight against armyworm has been done in three major ways. Number one, we scout the winter maize fields regularly to look out for signs of infestation. Number two, we apply insecticides regularly that are a preventative strength. Number three, when we do see signs of infestation, we can then apply stronger and more targeted insecticides when we see that the armyworms have come into the crop. For these smaller crops like what we've grown this year, we've been able to change things up and use insecticides that are of a higher quality and a little bit more expensive than we normally afford for larger field crops when we grow them in the summer. We've had to spray insecticides on our winter maize crop several times this year. It hasn't been easy. The armyworm problem that we're having here in Zambia is getting worse each and every year, and I've got a couple of thoughts about that. Number one, the population of armyworm mummies and daddies out there making little baby armyworms out there is growing. Ever since armyworm first came to Africa, in the 2010s from Brazil, the population out there is just literally growing and growing. Number two, the armyworms are getting more and more resistant to what they call the frontline insecticides, things like emamectin benzoate. And that, sadly, is because a lot of our farmers here in Zambia and other countries nearby, they don't spray properly. They don't spray the right dosage. They don't spray things in the right way. So the armyworms are actually getting more and more resistance, and we're going to have to keep using stronger and stronger insecticides. It's very similar to what is actually happening with antibiotics, where we're getting a lot more of MRSA. Oof, that is one very scary thing out there. Actually, there's one other thought. The winter maize crops that we've grown here as Mondo Farms on Bombay and Riverside 3 and 4 were actually the only winter maize that was in the nearby area. So we had presented the armyworms with a very concentrated feeding ground. You can imagine that there's an armyworm WhatsApp group and somebody posts there say, "Imwevane, kavieni ku Mondo Farms, kavieni ku Bombay na ku Riverside, mwalaria bwino na chidiva." One positive thing is that disease has not really been an issue for us with this winter maize crop. I guess the dry atmosphere and the colder temperatures are not ideal for funguses to thrive. Also, using drip irrigation also helps us to reduce disease because the leaves are not wet like they would have been with sprinklers. The ideal time for growing maize is during the warmer months. It needs heat units to grow properly. So farmers growing maize in winter are always going to feel the effects of the cold weather. But before we talk about the specific adventures that we went through here at Mondo Farms, let's look at the general principles. Firstly, growing crops in winter always takes a lot longer. The crop has a slower metabolic rate. It's kind of just slow and a little bit lethargic. And secondly, even when it does grow, it is never as healthy or as vigorous. As farmers think about where to grow their winter maize, they also need to think about, back to the location issue, are there places in the farm that are more prone to frost attacks? Now, this is something we as Mondo Farms have learned quite recently, that there are places here that have got frosty, kuri snow, as they call it. We've got places down by the river where, because of all the moisture that comes off the water, we get a lot of frost. And we also feel it a lot in open and exposed places like Westgate, which is up on the hill. So what is frost, you may be wondering, and how does it affect crops? We've covered it before recently in a video. You remember the one from Dubai one where our green pepper was affected by the cold and we had all of those challenges? You can watch that one after this one, of course. But here's the very short version. Frost is when it gets that cold, so cold, that the moisture, the water that's in the veins, the migazi of the plant freezes, and that then causes damage to the plant's tissue cells, and you get a thing that looks like it has burnt and they basically die, and it is quite hectic. Frost is not your friend. And here's what we experienced during 2 frost attacks that we had with our winter maize crop on Riverside 4.
So today, this morning, we were hit by frost. And you can see the scorching on the leaves, which has led to the turning of the leaves from green to this wilting color here showing. So like every other season in farming, winter has also its challenges, which is frost. So the scorching here was done by frost in the early hours of today, 12th of July.
By the way, Riverside 4 can be described as a place that is very ideal and wonderful for growing vegetable. Like I said, its irrigatability score is right up there. You've got it down at the base of a hill, so water comes down from the reservoirs with great pressure. But as we found out this winter, it is not a great place to grow winter maize. Firstly, it is close to the river. The name is Riverside after all. So you get a lot of air moisture, moisture in the air, which then leads to the frost that we talked about. And number 2, it's kind of shaped like a basin, so you don't get a lot of air circulation. But we are farming in the real world. This is not a textbook. The decision had been made for so many other reasons to grow some of our winter maize crop there. So we just had to live with it and make the most of it.
And we're down now here at Riverside 4. And this is how the maize looks like after the second wave of frost. From a distance, it looks very bad because of the scorched tips. But that's not our primary focus. Our primary focus is the tips, the growing points, which have life, and we can see them. The shoots are coming up, which is the most important thing at this stage. In terms of remedial measures, in terms of foliar spraying, there's nothing that we can do, but we applied the top dressing, which is urea, and that is really helping the maize. You can see most of the important leaves have been scorched, but we have this growing point coming up. which is very essential for us. So we haven't lost. We're still in it, and the maize looks very good with growing points coming up well. Bamanza, your comments? Because from here, once Pitapali stage, what we're going to have next now is tasseling. So once we get to the tasseling stage, namasi uksi, insha we're okay. The good part is mpepo ya chaira tu hapa manje, well, we still have growing points. Without these growing points, imagine many wakulima tassels. So it will start wilting from the tassel itself, going all the way to the heart of the plant. Oh, we're okay. We're still okay. You only got to check patadi, so patukabwera. You look at it, observe plant by plant. And the field is clean. You know, armyworms, which is also a positive move for us. Imagine you're hit by frost and armyworms. As soon as I start survive. Oh, you che. Is that cool? I'm pasa sheman's che.
One of the most important factors in success in any business venture, including, of course, farming, is having a positive mindset. You have to be ready for bad things to happen and then be able to keep your mind calm when facing setbacks, so that then you can use your knowledge, your experience, and apply critical thinking to overcome the challenges. So we didn't give up on the crop, and we kept looking after it. As always, we stick to the basics. Firstly, making sure that the plants have adequate water and nutrition. Yes, we apply water through the drips on a regular basis, but we also make sure to keep the field free from weeds as much as possible, which reduces competition for water and nutrients from unwelcome plants. And while the team is weeding, they also take care to maintain the ridges, which are eroded over time during watering. This improves water absorption around the roots. We also keep feeding it fertilizers to make sure it has proper nutrition. A little bit of detail about what kind of fertilizers we used. We used 2 fertilizers on our winter maize. The first one is urea, and the second one is a wonderful product by Omnia called Green Sulf. To get a bit more technical, we are modern farmers, so we apply some agrochem products that help our crops fare better in extreme weather conditions. We call them boosters, and they are things like Plant Catalyst, which is an amazing product, and other foliar fertilizers that really help our struggling crops fare much better. So I'm now down here at Riverside 4, and this is the maize that was so badly affected by the frost. You can tell from my demeanor that we managed to save it, and it is doing well. It is now tasseling and cobbing, and we might even get some of the famous double cobbing. A lot of hard work went into this, and this is the point where I really thank our Mondo Farms team, especially here at Winterthorn. Abena Tyson, our farm manager, Abena John, our farm supervisor, and the rest of the Winterthorn team. Guys, Tayami Kila. You can tell the positive vibes that Tyson shared when he was here towards the end of August, looking around and sharing this update.
So we're down here at Riverside 4, blocks BCDE, where we have our winter maize crop. So this is the maize that was squashed with frost, but after a few weeks of growth, it looks so good, and all the leaves, the odd leaves that were squashed, can hardly be seen. And our maize has started tasseling, which is a good thing. So just to show the odd leaves, these are the leaves that were scorched by frost, but none of the maize in here died. after the frost. The growing points were still in good shape, intact, and now we have growth and tassels. So these are the tassels. Some maize has grown to over 2 meters and some at 1.6, like this one here, and it has started tasseling. Overall, it looks so good. We have good moisture in the ground, which is very important for tasseling and cob formation. So now that it has started tasseling, we'll be seeing cobs here with the silks, and pollination will happen.
It's been a bit rough and there's a lot at stake, but so far our winter maize project is going well. We are learning some valuable lessons from it, and being able to get through serious challenges like the frost attacks has increased our confidence in our farming ability and made us more ready for what we will face in future. After all, as the effects of climate change continue to be seen, we may find that growing maize in winter becomes normal. And after our experience this February, when we had that long and difficult dry spell, we're pretty sure that having to supplement poor rainfall with some irrigation of field crops will most likely happen more than often than not. Meanwhile, we're looking forward to getting enough maize from what we've planted and have managed to grow to feed our workers and their families when we harvest our winter maize crops in October. So that's the story of our winter maize crop here at Mondo Farms for 2024. And this is the type of thing we like to share here on the Mondo Farms channel. Speaking of sharing, if this is the type of video that you know other people would appreciate seeing, then please click the share button down below and send it to them over your social media networks. If you want to keep watching more videos like this, then press the subscribe button. And if you press the bell icon, then YouTube will let you know when another video comes along, which is usually every couple of weeks or so. We'd also very much appreciate if you could press the thumbs up button, which shows the algorithm that this is a video that people like. And finally, if you've got something to share about how you've grown winter maize, or any non-specific, overly difficult questions you'd like to ask us, then please put them in the comments below. Over the last 4 years, I've really come to appreciate the opportunity to share part of our farming journey with you here on the Mondo Farms channel. If you want to see more of our videos about growing maize, have a look at one of these. Shale nipo. Bye-bye.